Water.
Thank you, sir, and thank you, the organizers, for asking me to speak here. A lot of what I have to say has already been covered by the previous two speakers, so I will pass over that quickly. Basically, sorry, this is what we are seeing. Okay, I won't use this pointer. What we are seeing in acute liver failure is loss of liver cells, the death of hepatocytes, and it is manifesting as jaundice, encephalopathy, and coagulopathy. Thank you. And the questions that the clinician is asking himself is, are there enough liver cells left for the patient to survive? Will brain swelling kill the patient? Will sepsis kill the patient? And if we decide to do a liver transplant, will he recover? And what about life after liver transplant? Of course, the patient and the family wants to know the answers to the last two questions if we do suggest a liver transplant. And it's appropriate to start with the King's College criteria. And these were basically developed using 588 patients with acute liver failure in the 70s and 80s before they were offering liver transplant for acute liver failure. And this was validated in 175 patients over the next 2 years. And basically, they found that in paracetamol poisoning, which accounted for a lot of their ALFs, if you have an arterial pH less than 7.3, patients very much likely to die, regardless of encephalopathy or anything else. Or if you have a prothrombin time of more than 100, which corresponds to an INR of about 6.5, and a creatinine of more than 3.4 with grade 3 or 4 encephalopathy, the patient is very likely to die and should be transplanted. For non-paracetamol, INR more than 6.5 or PT more than 100 seconds by itself is enough. Or if you have any three of these other criteria, that is age less than 10 or more than 40, non-A, non-B, drug-induced hepatitis. Hepatitis E probably has the same prognosis as A, but it was not on their list at that time. A longer interval from jaundice to encephalopathy than 7 days. INR of more than 3.5, bilirubin of more than 18. If you have any three of these, again the mortality is high, and these are patients who are candidates for transplant. How accurate are these criteria? The initial paper showed that they were very accurate, but over a period of time, as other studies have looked at it, this meta-analysis of 14 studies of paracetamol-induced liver failure, sensitivity was only 58%, the specificity was better, 95%. It seems that as management of liver failure has improved, the criteria are not that accurate. If we look at non-paracetamol induced liver failure, this is 18 studies over about 15 years. Sensitivity again is only about 58%, and the specificity is 95%. The older studies tend to be more sensitive and specific because you are basically leaving the patients on their own rather than trying to treat them. So this is a variety of studies, various studies looking at the accuracy of King's College criteria. Positive predictive value is fairly high in most of them. Negative predictive value not so good. And diagnostic accuracy intermediate. The Europeans, the French have been using the Clichy criteria, and these were basically initially described in 115 patients who had liver failure due to hepatitis B. It's very simple because it depends on one test, the factor V level. And basically they advise transplantation if there is grade 3 or 4 encephalopathy and a factor V level of less than 20% in young patients and less than 30% in patients who are over 30 years. This has not been validated as much as the King's College criteria, but it does seem to work. It's used in a lot of European centers. And the problem, of course, is the availability of this assay. The MELD score has traditionally been used to predict the mortality of patients with chronic liver disease over a period of time. Now, this was the 3-month mortality in patients with cirrhosis admitted at the Mayo Clinic. And as the MELD goes over 20, the mortality gets pretty high. But no one knew whether this could be used to prognosticate in acute liver failure. Again, the Mayo Clinic looked at the MELD score in the UNOS database, and they found in 720 patients listed as status 1 for liver transplant, that the MELD was a fairly good discriminant of prognosis even in acute liver failure. So they suggested listing patients based on the MELD criteria. There's this interesting study from Argentina in which they've compared the MELD, the King's College, and the Clichy criteria to assess prognosis in FHF. And they found that the King's College criteria and the Clichy criteria, you get similar positive predictive values. Clichy seems to be a little better in children than the King's College criteria in terms of positive predictive value. Now the MELD and the PELD scores seem to be fairly good at discriminating between the patients who died and who survived. In the adults, the average MELD score of the patients who survived was 26, and that of those who died was 38. Similarly, in children, the ones who survived, the mean MELD was 23. Those who died had a MELD of nearly 40. So when they put that graphically, these are the patients who survived, the adults and the children. These are the patients who died, adults and children. So if you were to use a MELD score of 30 to decide whether to list them for transplant or not, then these two patients would have been unnecessarily transplanted. And this patient who was not offered transplant would have died. But otherwise, you would have got it right for almost all the patients. Is the MELD score good for India? Well, the etiology of liver failure is different in India. And the UK series, 57% of the FHF was because of paracetamol. In France, surprisingly, it was predominantly hepatitis B and only 2% paracetamol. And as Dr. Dhiman pointed out, we hardly see paracetamol poisoning here. It's predominantly hepatitis viruses. So we don't know if the same criteria can be used here. The AIMS study, which was published in '96, looking at prognostic variables in Indian patients with FHF. This was a series of 423 patients. The factors which were found to predict mortality were, again, age more than 40 years, cerebral edema at admission, bilirubin more than 15, and PT more than 25 seconds. Apart from cerebral edema at admission, the other three are actually fairly close to the King's College criteria. This is Dr. Dhiman's own paper looking at the prognosis in FHF. This was the PGI series, and they found that the MELD score of more than 33 was the best discriminant between survivors and non-survivors. They listed 6 clinical prognostic indicators, and if any 3 of them was positive, it indicated poor prognosis. And these 6 were age more than 50, the jaundice encephalopathy interval more than 7 days, grade 3 or 4 encephalopathy, cerebral edema, INR, and creatinine. The only thing which is different here is that renal function also becomes a factor. But otherwise, all 3 sets of criteria, the AIMS criteria, the PGI criteria, the King's College criteria, are fairly similar, looking at essentially the same things. The Chinese experience has also not been very different, and they also looked at prognostic factors in patients dying of fulminant hepatic failure. They put their age cutoff at 43, bilirubin at 23, and a PT prolongation of more than 19, which would be fairly close to a INR of 3.5. Dr. Acharya's group looked at the performance of the various prognostic models, and if you look at the sensitivity and the specificity, there's really not much to choose between the models. They all work reasonably well. None of them is perfect. All of them are going to transplant a few patients unnecessarily. All of them are going to not offer transplant to a few patients who will then die of liver failure. But there's nothing better at present. Other prognostic indicators have been suggested by others. The Pittsburgh group said that if you do a CT volumetry and the liver volume is less than 1000 ml, then it's a poor prognosis. But we know from our donor data that Indian patients often have a liver volume less than 1000 ml as baseline, so this will not work here. A phosphate above 1.2. They've suggested that a low serum phosphate is an indicator of liver regeneration. So if it's not low, then that means there's no regeneration going on, and the patient is at high risk to die. Similarly, arterial lactate of more than 3 after adequate fluid resuscitation is very poor prognosis. Patient is very likely to die. As the grade of encephalopathy increases, the survival decreases. So that itself is an indicator of prognosis. But what about the prognosis if the patient is transplanted? There are a couple of studies which have looked at long-term outcomes after emergency liver transplant. This one is from Canada, London, Ontario. The 5 and 10-year survival in that group was 76 and 69%, but a significant number of patients were retransplanted. So the graft survival is 65 and 59%. In their series, cerebral edema was associated with poor outcomes. The mortality was 64% in the patients who had documented cerebral edema on a CT scan at the time of transplant. And if the cerebral edema was moderate to severe, only 25% of the patients survived. They did some ABO incompatible transplants as well, but these patients had an 83% retransplantation rate, predominantly because of diffuse biliary strictures. This is a recent report from Japan about outcomes of LDLT for liver failure. It's a nationwide database report. And they reported fairly good 1, 5 and 10-year survival, 79, 74, 73%. Important thing is once the patient gets through the initial 1 year, it tends to carry on until 10 years. There tend to be no problems after that, or very few problems after that. In our Gangaram experience, this was about 6 months ago, we had done about 650 transplants. Out of them, 50 were for FHF. The in-hospital mortality was 5, so the survival was 90%. Interestingly, we had 2 patients who progressed to brain death after liver transplant. And these were both patients who had moderate cerebral edema at the time of transplant. One patient progressed to brain death during liver transplant, and the transplant was abandoned. So cerebral edema is something we have to be careful about. So to summarize, there are many scoring systems available for assessing prognosis with little to choose between them. So you should just select one system for your center and stick to it and follow it consistently. Cerebral edema is a problem which is underappreciated, and a CT scan before taking up for transplant should be done in any patient who's got focal signs, seizures, or who's unconscious and on a ventilator. Thank you.
That why these prognostic indicators or the scoring system, they are not working. For example, if you look at the King's College, the positive predictive value is good still,
Yes.
but negative predictive values goes down to the between 50 and the 60%.
Yeah.
And you have given reason that there may be a change in the management. Initially, there was more of a just wait and watch policy, but now you are actively intervening as far as the raised intracranial tension is concerned. You have the hypothermias. You have so many modalities that you can control, therefore bringing down the modalities also. Based on that, that's what I am saying, that if you develop your own system in your own setting, tailor-made prognostic criteria, they are the best. Alternatively, what you can do that you have so many prognostic models and you have the patient with you. If you can do the 50 transplantation, I presume that you may be having the 400, 300 patients who have not received the liver transplantation. Right. And you can always see which are the models which can work better in your situation. And the one that is working better, that you can choose that one. So you cannot take guarantee for the King's College or even AIIMS or the PGI. I think this is your own system that works ultimately.
We have been using the King's College criteria. So these 50 patients, all of them met the King's College criteria. But there were also many patients who met the criteria and could not have a transplant. So it would be interesting to look at the data on how they fared.
You are using KCH, but you have used others ones and compared?
No, we haven't.
We thank all the 3 speakers for sticking on to the time. On behalf of the organizers, we would like to present the mementos to the speakers.